First, you need to install your ready-to-paint paper on a rigid support, cardboard for example, at least the same dimensions of the drawing or a little bit bigger in order to turn it while you paint, to get the most comfortable position. Under this board you'll have to put a little wedge to angle it slightly. Usually beginners own a 12 colors watercolor set. As we need purple color, we'll have to make it by mixing red and blue. Or maybe you have the purple color in a bigger set, or maybe the purple color in a tube. To be sympathetic with beginners, I work with the 12 colors set. You will need 2 bottles of clear water, a small one to take clear water to dilute the pigments and a big one to clean your brush when you'll change the color. You will need a cloth to remove the excess of water and a white paper towel in case of accident and also to check if your brush is clean. Next to me I have a couple of cotton buds in case of accident if a drop occurs. We are going to paint with 3 brushes. The first one we call it Japanese brush in French. It's a squirrel's hair's brush, sharp to paint with precision, but with a big belly which can contain a lot of liquid to paint a good surface. The second one is also with natural hair. It's an old one, worn out, but the important is it holds a good stock of water too. It has to be visually different so you recognize quickly which is the brush for color and the one for water. The third brush needed is a small, slim and very sharp one. You usually get one in the watercolor box, but I lost mine. We need it for graphic details and very small surfaces. Before starting, we have to prepare a good amount of purple watercolor. We have to make a stock of liquid color quite concentrated with pigment and to prepare enough paint because we don't want to run out of paint in the middle of painting a petal. But in case you run out of your color, memorize the proportion of your blend. I made my purple with 2 doses of red for 1 dose of blue. You should have already made a palette testing on the same paper to try and recognize the colors. You need another piece of paper to try and practice on it before painting on the ready-to-paint drawing. It's good to practice a little bit and reassure yourself before starting. The brush is obviously a tool to paint, but it's also a little pump to fetch the water and transport it to dilute the pigment. Then you discharge the colored liquid by wiping out the brush on the edge of the painter's palette. This drawing is based on this photo. I changed a bit the shape, but as you can see, this flower is monochrome, so we'll have to play with just one color and clear water to interpret the light effects on the petals. I'm going to show you 2 ways of painting gradated color with watercolor. First way, you spread your washes of purple and then you use the brush dedicated to clear water, and with it you touch the edge of the colored surface you just painted. Don't go inside the purple surface, but just on the external limit of it. And as you spread the clear water, the purple surface is spreading out, making the color gradient, and the inclined plane helps it very much. Second way, you can spread the clear water first and then you lay the purple. Though the effect is nice, this way is a bit more hazardous for beginners. So my advice is to spread the color before drawing it out with the water. I insist on this point, don't go back with your brush in the washes you have just spread, because you'll cause stains in the surface. If you really need to go back into the surface, you have to wait till it's completely dry. I want to show you in this small surface, you can see as I'm spreading the color, as the paper is inclined, a kind of little gutter is forming, and with your brush you have to lead this gutter to enlarge the surface without going back in the wet surface. When you paint with watercolor, the tricky part is to load the right quantity of liquid. The paper has to get wet but not overloaded. We don't want to see the liquid forming or swelling on the paper. The paint has to shine on the surface but not making a reservoir. If you let a big drop, the pigment will move on the edges, marking the surface like a ring. I'll show you later when it's dry. Now I'm going to show you a little tip to reproduce the very fine lines in the petals with a pick. If you don't have toothpick, you can try to use the handle of your brush. You spread your washes of purple, and while it's wet, you scratch the lines. You see the pigments are moving into the scratches. By this way, you get the lines you can see crossing the petals of the clematis. In case you didn't manage to get the color gradient, while it's still wet, you can remove some washes by swiping the color off with your clear water brush well wrung out on the cloth. Just like this. Let's start to paint on the drawing. Take some paint and follow the contour carefully with the point of the brush on the line of the drawing and the belly of the brush slightly pressed on the paper. Then, as soon as you can, before it becomes dry, take your second brush with clear water and touch just the edge of the wet paint and spread the clear water to the center of the petal. Then you have the pleasure to see the color spreading out and make the color gradient by itself. Now you do the same on the other side of the petal. Be aware of working comfortable. Turn the pictures to ease your gesture and think of using the sloped surface to facilitate the washes to spread out. As you can see, I put too much watercolor and it accumulated near the center. But fortunately, I can remove it. I carefully swipe my brush, then I touch the liquid swelling on the paper with the point, and by capillary action, the paint goes back into the brush. So let's continue while it's wet. Turn the drawing to be comfy and use the slope. Take the brush dedicated to clear water, touch the edge of the exterior of the surface you just painted and spread the clear water to the center of the petal. You may think you are not painting because there is no color, but you are. You are making the color gradient and also you're preparing the next step in the center of the petal. To paint the lines in the middle of the petal, first you have to spread clear water in the center. Then take the brush dedicated to the color and paint just with the point of the brush. It's almost like skimming the paper with the point and lead the color from the end of the petal to the center of the flower. Then, while it's wet, as soon as possible, take the pick, Scratch gently the paper following the lines of the drawing, and then you get the lines in the petal of the clematis. Let's continue. To avoid the paint to spread out from a petal to another, we are going to paint a new surface far enough the first one which is still wet. So we are going to paint another petal, but not the one just beside, because we don't want the paint to spread out from a petal to another. Turn the board to be comfy and take advantage of the slope. Take your paint and again, like for the first petal, follow the drawing with the point and press gently the belly of the brush inside the petal. Again, lead the little gutter to the center of the flower. And then take your brush dedicated to clear water. Touch the edge and let it spread out. We want a graduated color and not the mark of the contour. If it doesn't spread really well by itself because the colored surface is not wet enough or because it's hot and it dries too quickly, you can go over it again with your clear water to erase the contour. But if the ring doesn't disappear after you pass the brush 2 or 3 times, just stop. Don't insist because you're going to damage the paper. In this case, it's better to let the paint dry completely before trying to improve it. So let's paint the other side of the petal. Turn the board to be comfy and to take advantage of the slope. Take your paint and again, like for the first petal, follow the drawing with the point and press gently the belly of the brush inside the surface of the petal. Again, lead the little gutter to the center. While it's still wet, take your brush dedicated to clear water. Touch the edge and let it spread out to the middle of the petal. Again, spread clear water in the center to paint the lines of the petal and then take the brush dedicated to the color, skim the paper with the point of the brush, leading the little drop of purple toward the heart of the flower. Then, while it's still wet, as soon as possible, take the pick, scratch gently the paper following the lines of the drawing. So we have to repeat these steps for each petal and remember to start a new surface, not beside and not in contact with a wet one. I think you will experience your need to be very focused on your work because you have to be accurate and fast. So do not hesitate to have breaks. Personally, I don't work watercolor more than 3/4 of an hour because after this period I noticed little accidents and mistakes start to occur. So you have to do these 4 steps for each petal. 1. Paint on the drawing. 2. Spread out the color with clear water. 3. Let a fine line spread out in the middle and scratch the paper. But don't forget to look at the photograph because it shows you the area of shadow where you lay the color more concentrated with pigment and the area of light where you make the color gradient. And remember to start a new surface not beside and not in contact with a wet one. Don't forget to be comfy to ease your gesture because to paint takes enough of your concentration. After I had made my color gradient, I noticed a little drop of watercolor. So I quickly make my scratches and then I remove this drop by capillary action with my brush. By the way, now I can show you on the test paper, yet it's dry. You can see the ring caused by the stain done with too much quantity of liquids. Those traces are okay when you want to paint an old wall, but they are not okay on the smooth and silky surfaces of the flower. To verify if a surface is dry, don't touch directly the paper with your fingers. First, do a visual checking. If the surface is matte, then you can tap gently, not in the middle of a drawing, but on a small area. If you feel it's cold, it's not dry enough, you have to wait or very carefully assist drying with an hair dryer. The purple petals are now finished, so we are going to paint the heart of the clematis with yellow. I insist you must have your water really clean. Yellow can't stand murky water. So clean your brush carefully and check on the white paper towel that it's free of any color. Test your yellow paint on your testing piece of paper. It has to be very intense and concentrated. Observe your picture. The yellow is like a crown but mainly apparent under the little ball in the heart. Preserve some white between the yellow and the purple surfaces. We are going to let the yellow paint dry nicely and work further away from it. As we have yellow paint ready, we are going to use it to make a green. I want to use a green more yellowish than bluish because the color of the clematis is already very blue and cold. Please avoid the emerald green or blue-green for the leaves. Generally, I use sap green added with yellow. It's a warmer green, though it gives a feeling of freshness of the plant. Lay the green on the leaf. You can preserve the white for the veins or not. It's as you want. but work as you worked for the petal in one go for each leaf before it dries. Then paint another leaf further away to prevent the watercolor to spread out from a leaf to another. Now the video will be accelerated, but of course you can press on pause whenever you want. Now the leaves have been done, we are going to paint the twigs. Choose a natural red color like sienna. I blend some sienna with the purple to make it darker. Take the sharp small brush for this part because it's more a line than a surface. Don't forget you should try your color on the testing piece of paper. We're going to paint the twigs in two steps. First, we lay the paint between the lines of the drawing, and when it has dried, second step, we are going to paint with a second layer of the same color, but just like an underline. While I was painting the leaves and the twigs, the yellow paint in the heart of the clematis had the time to dry. As we have some red beforehand, we can use it, make it darker and concentrated to paint the pistils and the center of the flower, which looks like a little ball. First, you can try to make the very fine lines of the pistils on your testing paper. And if it's too difficult because it's too precise or you're shaking, don't bother to paint it and draw it with a pencil. Don't worry, it's not cheating, it's adapting. Now the red twigs have dried, we are going to underline them to give a bit of relief and more realistic aspect. The washes have to be a bit more concentrated with pigments. Trace these lines below even if you can't see them on the picture. As a basic principle, the light is above, so the shadow is under the object. At this stage of the work, we could consider the subject is finished. The clematis seems to be finished, but it's interesting to enhance the flower by working on its background. I like to paint the background very dark to make the flower look lighter thanks to the contrast effect. We have to make a very dark, opaque and concentrated in pigment and lay this color very close to the petals. Make your dark green and try it on the testing paper. The twigs form a kind of net. Start to paint the smallest surfaces very close to the flower between the twigs. As you go further away from the flower, you are going to make your green lighter by adding some clear water with the second brush and make the green blur. Maybe it's more practical to use the small and sharp brush in this very small area. Be aware of your comfort, because this is demanding to be very accurate. Don't forget to have a break. Obviously, finish the whole surface. Don't stop in the middle of a surface, because you would make a ring. Ooh la la, the surface is really too small. I have to use the small brush. Here, near the point of this petal, we have to paint very close with very dark paint, but as it's a bigger surface, we can start to blur the green as we move away. So we have to use again the brush dedicated to clear water. As the background is blur, you don't have any defined shapes to follow. So if you want to, you can play with your material and the effect of watercolor in the wet paper. As you can see happening, I accidentally painted over the red twig, so very quickly I take my cotton swab to remove the stain. If you have to remove a stain, don't rub the surface, just press it. Just dab the stain, otherwise you're going to fluff the paper. From time to time, you will notice the work moving off camera. It's because as we proceed, we need to see the whole work further away. A painting is looked at further away than the distance it's made. So from time to time, hold your picture away. Look at it at arm's length. You can even look at it in a mirror for a more critical eye. Progressing in the picture, I noticed the first green surface has lost its darkness after it has dried, so I'm laying on another coat of green. At this stage of the work, as I look at it at a distance, I notice I can enhance the contrast in the shadow part of the clematis. As the flower is completely dry, we can work exactly the same way we did at the first coat. First, you ensure that your brush is really clean, not a hint of a greenish color. So change the water and check the brush on the white paper towel. I'm going to enhance the purple color in the area of shadow. I'm going to lay more purple color on the petal which passes under the other. It's the same principle as the green background effect. I make this petal darker to give more relief to the petal passing above. It's just an enhancement of contrast. Be careful when you want to improve with the second coat. Paint little by little the new surfaces, step by step. Don't add too much paint. Check often your picture. Look at it at arm's length and please try to feel when it's enough, because sometimes when you try too hard to improve, you can go too far.